Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the CPA Marketing Genius podcast. I've got a special guest for us. His name is Ted Tivetts. Ted's a copywriter at CPA Marketing Genius, and I'm invited him. He's got a very interesting story. He's got a very important message to share with accountants, accounting firm owners. And so, Ted, welcome, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Salim.
Great to have you. Very quickly, I'll read Ted's bio, and then we'll dive right in. Ted is a recovering high school English teacher, and he interviews our CPA firm members to discover what makes them unique and special. Then he crafts finely tuned web page content and descriptions focused on attracting their ideal clients. When he is not wrestling with words, Ted's a whitewater guide and a kayaker. He can be found traveling the US in a converted school bus and splashing in rivers. What an interesting career and an interesting life, Ted, with you and your wife traveling the South America next in your converted school bus.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been, after 30 years of living in the North, we decided it's time to get out and splash around rivers where they're not frozen in the wintertime. So we're pretty excited to be out, traveling the world in a bus and trying to experience everything.
Yeah. So, a little bit about your backstory, how you got into copywriting. Perhaps give us a kind of a high level, how did you get into writing copy? And then we'll talk about what that is and how to craft a unique message.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny in the sense that, when I do talk to accountants too, and a lot of them like, my dad used to quiz me on multiplication tables when I was 3, there's always that aptitude for numbers and those concepts. And my aptitude's always been with language. I've been writing songs since I was a young kid, fell in love with Shakespeare, I think, especially because of the words. And so, really kind of became entrenched in language, from an early age. And then, so I became an English teacher for 30 years and, really enjoyed obviously working with kids, but, trying to help them shape their own voices. And as I was looking forward to the sort of next chapter in life of, getting out of Maine and trying to think about, all right, what skill sets do I have to offer the world that I can work from the road? And so we started converting the school bus, got into YouTube, internet marketing, and then, I was part of this internet marketing group, and one of the mentors there, Miles Beckler, who is an incredible guy, he kind of looked at my writing and said, literally said, dude, this is what you should be doing. Instead of trying to do the YouTube channels and things like that, there are people who need skill sets of people how to write, and you can do this. So learn to be a copywriter. And so I started to do that, and really it's not that much different from English teaching. I take people's ideas and help shape them into messages that resonate with their audience, and it's given me the opportunity to travel around the bus and help people at the same time and work with language. So it's been a pretty good fit.
That's awesome. So that's such an interesting story there, Ted. Thanks for sharing that. What does copywriting mean?
Well, it's interesting because when I tell people even now that I'm a copywriter, and they're thinking like property rights, like copyright 1972 and holding patents and things like that. But it's writing with an intent to persuade, and particularly to persuade someone in business to purchase something, to buy, to convert. And so the language is really geared towards not only communicating an idea, but getting the reader or the listener to take action. And whether it's to be sign up on an email list or stop by an open house or visit or purchase something, but you want the reader, the audience, to actually take some sort of step, to get them closer to your business in one way or another. So that's essentially what it is. And it takes a lot of different forms between, a radio commercial, a TV commercial, a newspaper or magazine ad, a sales letter that can happen online, a video sales letter, maybe just getting a landing page where someone signs up on your mailing list. So it takes a whole bunch of a web page. Really, you want people to engage in your web page and take that next step to contact you. So it's any of that writing within the business world that gets your audience to become one step closer to becoming a customer.
Yeah, that's great. And so it's the message that we want to communicate to our target client, right? To our target audience. And why is it important? Why do people spend time? The most successful companies, they'll spend millions and millions of dollars to make sure that they've created a message that speaks to their audience. So from your perspective, why is copywriting important, or that, articulating and clarifying that marketing message?
Communication's really complex. If you think about the mechanism, you have to formulate an idea in your head and then articulate language, whether it's spoken or written, which has to be distributed somehow, whether it's through the web page or your voice or writing, whatever. Then it has to be decoded by the receiver, who has to hear it or read it, and then they have to interpret it and then sort of put it into their own words. So it's a pretty complicated process. You have to do all of that. And so all of that is important because it's complex. And second, like, what you're really trying to do is to get them in order to take action. And the only reason that people are going to do business for the most part is if they know, like, and they trust you. And so there's no way they can get a chance to know you unless they can, sort of see behind the curtain and listen to your voice, and you're revealing something about you. The only way they're going to trust you if you can establish that credibility. And so you have to do that through language as well. And then, then finally they'll actually do the purchase, or it's always purchase. Sometimes it's, sign up for the email list or whatever, but they're not going to take that next step closer to the business unless they do those three things. And so doing all of that is complex and difficult, and especially for people whose language, isn't part of their brain. We're all wired differently. Some people do that well and some people don't. And so that, that's what makes copywriting valuable and important.
Yeah. And we certainly do this when we are creating a website for a CPA firm owner. You're an important part of this mix here, where you're creating the marketing message, the copywriting that goes onto the website. And we've looked at so many websites for CPA firms, and that's why they come to us, is they want to redesign it. Like, from a marketing standpoint or copywriting standpoint, Ted, what are some things that you see in a copy where you say, no, this is not hitting the mark? What are some signs, 3 things, 5 things, 7 things that you see in copy that are like things to avoid, mistakes not to make?
Well, it's interesting, even though I'm the writer, a lot of times just visually design, they look like something from the 90s or even earlier. Like, so visually, it's just sort of very boring text. But from a writing perspective, they either, most of the time, they just don't say anything. Like, there's no clear understanding that they understand the problems that their audience is facing, and it's very vague. And so from a if I read that from a client perspective, I kind of look at, well, if they don't really understand the problems, or they don't show me that they understand, how can I trust that they have the solution? So having some empathy for their audience and clearly communicating that they understand the problems, I think, is really huge. And then the second part is, can they clearly articulate a solution? And sometimes they can say they do it, but without some sort of mechanism or clearly communicating why they can do it or how they do it, it doesn't really become believable. And so being really clear with those specifics, I think, helps the reader with the believability piece. And the other part, and this is a personal thing that I just hate, like when I get into it, and all it does is list their accomplishments. Well, I'd have an MBA in finance from such and such university. I've been practicing 18 years, and it just sounds like this corporate blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm immediately bored. There's no story. And I think more and more, I think the B2B, the business to business, is a misnomer. It's really person to person. And like I said, if you go back to the adage that people want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust, first of all, they got to become people. And I look at a web page, it brings no personality, no voice. They don't seem like a person. They seem like this corporate conglomerate, and it just becomes boring, and it doesn't allow them to separate. There's no story, whereas personalities are distinct. There's a great marketing, I forget who it was, but someone says, imagine going out to date with someone who had a bag on their head the whole time. Masks are great for superheroes, but they're not necessarily great for people in that sense. And it's like, well, how do you really get to know that person if you're always sort of behind this wall? And so I think bad copy doesn't allow the personality to emerge. And so it's just not, it's not engaging. And then, you know, I see it as like, I don't necessarily know this person, so I don't really want to do business with them. So, I know that was a lot of stuff, Salim. I
There
hope
was
I,
a lot there. There was a
yeah.
lot there, and I appreciate it. You know, I mean, that was some really important stuff that you pointed out, and so that kind of, you know, lets us know the mistakes to avoid,
Hmm.
and, you know, really even to look at our own, you know, everyone to, you know, a listener to look at his own website or message and say, hey, am I making these mistakes? So then you can change it. So let's turn it around and give us some tips on what makes good copy when you're designing copy. Perhaps give us like the 5 most important things or 3 most important things. I know there are many, but let's just go with a few of the most important things that you're paying attention to.
You know, when I started studying a lot, I learned a lot from Terry Dean. And one thing that I think that Terry does a great job is sort of building the structure of it down. And so looking at, are you clearly identifying the desperate problem that your audience has? And if you can clearly define it, and better yet, tell stories and be specific and illustrate it, your audience is going to like, oh, they understand me. They know where I'm coming from. So I think that's really important. And then the second part is, are you creating some sort of unique solution? And what makes your solution different? Because everybody's got a CPA, you know, everybody's got a degree, you know, accounting degree, or they have the numbers. Well, so what? What makes your niche special? You know, I love working, you know, with Marcel, who really hey, I know trucks. Like, I was in the trucking industry. I can help people in the trucking industry because I know them. So that really makes him special. And so we're kind of focusing on, what are your either skill sets, your processes, you know, what is it that separates you from your competition? And everybody's got their own individual personality and individual skills. Figure out what those are and then highlight those and really emphasize those. So getting that unique perspective and that voice, I think, goes a long way to doing that too, not being afraid of allowing your personality to come through, because that's going to resonate with the right type of clients you want. If you click on a personal level, they're going to be great customers, because you'll just always be able to relate to each other, and it'll be much easier than, you know, than people you don't relate to. You know, so then, you know, once you're clear on the desperate problem, the unique solution, you know, really kind of getting to, well, what's the offer? What are you offering them? And then be specific with that. Are you custom designing your fractional CFO services? And so this is what you're offering. Be really clear on what you can do for these people. And then, you know, the other parts of it is you need to prove it. You know, how can you can just say one thing, but are your testimonials, are your reviews, what can you put forth to convince your audience to establish that credibility and the trust? And, you know, years of service is always useful. I've been doing this for 18 years or whatever, but that still doesn't go, I don't think, as far as, you know, what are the stories you could tell? And I really like the case studies where accountants have gone in and said, hey, this one client, I saved him $50,000 in taxes by doing X, Y, and Z. And I think those are really, really convincing. And that's kind of the really it. And then, you know, to some degree, in typical copywriting, you want to create some sort of urgency about why you should do it today. The web pages is kind of hard to do that because it's ongoing, it's evergreen. But you know, those are things to consider sometimes, but not necessarily always with web pages. So that's what I think goes into good copy. You know, that structure of identifying all those pieces, but at the same time doing it with credibility and doing it with a personality and a voice.
So good. Thank you so much. This is really good. We're kind of coming to the tail end. I've got a couple of questions before we finish off. How do you, you know, how do you pull that, you know, you mentioned voice. How do you get the voice, you know, when you're writing copy for a CPA, for a website we're designing? What's your process in getting the voice from the owner, the firm owner?
You know, it sounds kind of corny, but I asked them about what they were like as kids. You know, I think we get so, you know, like what you know, so two different things. You know, what were you like as a kid? You know, what kind of things did you do? And inevitably, it almost comes back to, or I remember this story where I solved this problem. almost always it comes to the, my ability to do this. And because I had success with that, I realized that I should go into that. So I try to get those stories, for one thing. And then the other thing I like to ask is like, hey, I'm traveling this bus and I broke down in your city, and I say, hey, I'm here for like a couple days, and you say, yeah, come on over and hang out. What would we do? And I think some people
Hmm.
like get stuck with that all of a sudden. They're like, well, and they balk at it first, like, I don't know. And then a couple of probing questions, and next, like, we're off, we're going to go travel. I'm going to watch my daughter at this track meet, or we're going to do this. And then they're like, oh,
Hmm.
so that's kind of what you're all about. And so
Hmm.
trying to take those two things and then and tell the stories. I think the personal stories are the ones I think that allow that voice to come through and paint a picture of them as people. That's how
Hmm.
I do it. And I would say, if someone's doing it for themselves, it's kind of really think about, well, what do you stand for? What are your most important values? Are you about efficiency? Are you about family and loyalty and going that extra mile? Are you about, being creative and being a little bit edgier, like, interpreting tax code, not necessarily as a law, but like as a movie. How do you interpret these things? So I think those all important things are good strategies in order to, find that voice.
Hmm. So good. And you're such a valuable and integral member of CPA Marketing Genius, because you've got a way of getting this out with the way you're asking the questions and the tone you ask these questions. And you get this really meaty stuff from the firm owner, the CPA. And we become busy and we forget this stuff, right? And you have an outsider yourself, coming in and asking these questions, and it sparks some stuff. It sparks a fire within us. It rekindles memories. It rekindles what we stand for, as you said. And I think really bringing this into the copy is what matters. And people buy from us for what we stand for our why. It's not for our what. What we provide is accounting service, tax services, CFO services, not a whole lot different from my firm to listeners and so forth, but why we do it, and bringing that sauce, that secret sauce, is what I feel really makes a firm, the messaging really stand out.
For sure. It reminds me of like, my other job as a raft guide. People are disconnecting from their other world and they want an experience, and when I approach every day as a guide, I think about the experience begins from the moment they check in. It's getting
Hmm.
their equipment, it's the bus ride, it's the actual trip, it's the post trip. So it's all an experience. And I think you're absolutely right. Hopefully the copy communicates that my experience, if I'm going to come to you, Salim, as an accountant, it's not just handing off my paperwork and getting it back. It's how that whole process goes. And it's how I feel about the process. Do I feel like I'm being taken care of? Do I feel like, you're not just processing the paperwork, but you're aggressively going out of your way to find ways to help me and save money. And that sort of increases my loyalty to you, because I know you
Hmm.
have my back. And I think communicating or that experience from beginning to end is what's really an important part of any of your business messaging.
Yeah, yeah. This is so good, Ted. I really, really appreciate it. And I invite listeners to come check us out, cpamarketinggenius.com. If you want to be part of our journey of helping CPA firm owners create marketing messages that are amazing, that make you stand out, that make you unique and different, that gets your inner voice into your copy, your story, and so forth, please do that. Thank you, Ted, so much. Really good stuff, man. Appreciate it.
But my pleasure, Salim. Thank you.